To me, living a dignified life means being accepted by your peers and embraced by your wider community. It means having the opportunity to fulfill your true potential. According to Human Rights Watch, 15% of the world's population live with disabilities, facing significant barriers to realizing their human rights. That's over 1 billion people. These barriers include discrimination in education, employment, housing and transport, denial of the right to vote, and being stripped of the right to make decisions about their own lives. I really look forward to the day when I don't have to state the obvious anymore, that we are all created equal, that human rights are everybody's rights, that nobody is less than human, and that everyone has a human right to belong.
My perspective is really as someone who's lived in this city and been a McGill student, both as a completely able-bodied person and as disabled. And this is where McGill and the city really collide, was the construction projects that were happening last year. I was having so many problems just being at school. The subject of my doctoral work has been building codes because I found that to be one of the biggest challenges for me. People always say that Montreal is inaccessible and because of how old our buildings are and the geography, but I think that both of those excuses they're not fair, because there are cities that are a lot older than ours, like London, that are way more accessible than Montreal, especially their metro system. And there's cities like San Francisco that geographically, they're very steep, and yet they are required to be accessible. And just because in the past people with disabilities stayed home, were institutionalized, doesn't mean that we should leave it that way, and we wouldn't accept that for any other type of identity, whether it's race or gender.
On the Prime Minister's Youth Council, I try and speak on behalf of all young Canadians with disabilities, which is a bit of a tall order. And it's been an interesting challenge, I can tell you, even within the council itself, in settings where I'm speaking with the Prime Minister and other federal cabinet ministers, some of the very basic things about accessibility, like where we're holding our meetings or what the photo opportunity event is going to be right after, are not inclusive. And so I hope with conversations like this we can, make it so that it's not just people living with disabilities who always have to advocate on behalf of ourselves, but that allies also take some of this burden and help make our societies more inclusive. But the story absolutely doesn't end there. It's going to take a very, very deep cultural shift in what accessibility and inclusion looks like. And that accessibility is not just about people with disabilities, but it's about making a space more inclusive for everyone.
Access is also about culture and access to attitudes. So are we tolerating people with disabilities? Or is it about rethinking society? And we're thinking about how everyone belongs and everyone adds value. And that change in attitudes is, in many ways, in the 40-something countries we've worked, the greatest challenge, because we're looking at thousands of years of embedded stigma and subordination and cultural constructs about those people don't belong here. Those thousands of years take a long, long time to change.
It seems to me the concern with social connectedness is another way of saying that our lives are we're more than economic actors, we're more than isolated individuals. We should be more than isolated individuals. Social connectedness is extremely important to have a full and rich life for everyone. It's really parallel to saying we should move from a medical model of disability, which sees disability as, in effect, the problem of the person with a disability and their responsibility to do something about it, to a social model that sees it as this is part of the society that we are all part of, and don't we all have an obligation to create as open and fully inclusive a society as possible.
Do you think the disability movement could benefit from the adoption of a universal language in the hopes of creating and facilitating inclusive and accessible conversation?
things change over time, and so what might be seen as acceptable or not acceptable today might not be tomorrow, or what might not be seen as a disability today might be recognized tomorrow as we sort of learn more and maybe become more empathetic.
I think it's okay to be uncomfortable. I think a big part of the disability conversation and discussion on accessibility is a lot of people don't engage with it because it's awkward and uncomfortable. Without feeling that discomfort, we fail to really acknowledge the situation and leave room for all these different identities and different disabilities.
If we believe that disability is diversity, then there should be room for expression.
We are all affected. We are all involved, whether it's a family member or ourselves. We will all experience some form of disability, especially as we age. Our society is greatly enriched in every way when there is true access to opportunity and true connectedness throughout our community and to one another. I call this belonging, and I believe it should be a human right.